I hope my viewers can excuse the only partially made bed. I left it red for a reason. Hello everybody, welcome back to Meddling in Antiquity. My name's Teray, and today we're going to be talking about Brad Falchuk and Ryan Murphy's American Horror Story. Getting into how I'm going to be structuring this video, I'm going to first go through all of the seasons, all 9 of them, in order with a brief synopsis of what the story is about without giving too much away. In the analysis part, I'm going to break down what I liked and disliked about each season in the order of my personal favorite, number 1, to least favorite, number 9, of every single season of the show so far. Let's get into it. Going into our brief breakdown of the show itself, starting with season 1, Murder House, which is about the Harmon family who move to a very haunted house in Los Angeles and Pasadena to kind of escape the aftermath of an affair. And that is generally about as much as I can give away without spoiling the whole season. It's very interesting, and it is the first season, so there are some things that are good and some things that are bad, like most things, but that is kind of a brief summary of season 1, and that's where we kind of were introduced to the very iconic cast. We got Evan Peters, Jessica Lange, Taissa Farmiga, the iconic people who kept coming back every single season. Season 2, Asylum, is where we kind of see, this is where some of the plot holes start to come in, because we know every single season is connected. So Murder House takes place in 2011, and then we jump back to 1964, I believe. Yes, 1964 is when Asylum takes place, and that is about a convent-run mental asylum, and there is a manhunt happening for this killer, whose name has escaped me. However, it is very much a riff off the idea of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's very obviously inspired by real-life serial killer Ed Gein. So, Asylum, there's we get introduced to some of the more iconic characters. We see Lily Raby coming in as Sister Mary Eunice, Jessica Lange as Sister Jude, and this is where we see, I believe, Chloe Sevigny's first major role in the show, which is really nice because I really like her. She's very funny, and her characters are always very similar, and I really enjoyed her in this season. Season 3, which is Coven, which is known for being the Stevie Nicks season, is about a young girl who discovers that she is a descendant of the witches who were not burned at Salem, and attends an academy called Miss Rochebow's Academy for Exceptional Young Ladies, where she learns to control those powers. And this is where we see Emma Roberts' first introduction to the season. It's where we see Patti LuPone's first role in the show. An iconic Jessica Lange character. We see Sarah Paulson step into the show in a major role. Essentially introducing some of the people who would continue to come back and play these very incredible iconic characters. Next we have season 4, Freak Show, which is about a group of carnies who are essentially trying to kind of fight for their place in the society they live in that doesn't necessarily accept them simply because they are carnival people. And this season takes place in 1956. Coven takes place in 2013. So it jumps back and forth through time quite a bit in the earlier seasons. And this is where we see the introduction of these iconic carnival characters, including the phenomenal Erica Irvin, who I have had the good fortune to meet at some point. She is the kindest, sweetest person I have ever met in my entire life, and I sobbed in the Rayleigh's self-checkout line when I got to meet her. She's incredible. But we see, this is where we start to see the connection to other seasons. We have Naomi Grossman's character Pepper, who shows up in Asylum before she ends up at the asylum now. It's very, very interesting to kind of see where everything starts to connect, and that kind of started happening with Freak Show. Next, we have season 5, Hotel, which takes place in 2015, and that is where we see the entrance of the iconic Lady Gaga as the Countess. Season 4 also saw the introduction of Matt Bomer and Finn Wittrock to the show, but they have much bigger roles when it comes to playing their characters in season 5. And also we see another role for Kathy Bates. Probably my personal favorite role from Dennis O'Leary in the entire show so far is him playing Liz Taylor in Hotel. But it is about a police detective who is kind of struggling with losing time and trying to navigate his way through this also very haunted hotel, populated almost entirely by ghosts. And there's also serial killers, where we see the lovely Lily Rabe playing an eerily good Eileen Wuornos. And it's also where we see the actor who played Twisty come back and play the character Twisty was based on, John Wayne Gacy, along with a cast of people, along with particularly the actor who plays Jeffrey Dahmer. Looks a little too much like Jeffrey Dahmer, but that worked perfectly for that particular season of the show. Next, we have season 6, which was Roanoke. That is essentially playing on the lost colony of Roanoke legend. It's very much centered on that, except it turns it into a cult kind of thing, as opposed to the actual historical happenings, which is the colony of Roanoke married into the local tribe of native peoples there and mixed themselves in. But this makes it seem like they were a bloodthirsty cult led by the first Supreme, Shakrath, played by Lady Gaga. And I believe that was, so far, has been her last role in the show. But that's where we saw the introduction of Adriana Porter, who is amazing. We brought back some people who hadn't been in the show for a while. But it's and that is also where we saw, season 5 is where we saw the exit of Jessica Lange, who is legendary. No one will ever forget her. Then season 7, Colt, is about the election. I shouldn't really have to explain any further than that. It was about the election. Yeah. Anyway, moving on to season 8, which is Apocalypse, which is about the end of the world. And that is where we saw the introduction of someone who quickly became a very, very popular fan favorite, Cody Fern, as Michael Langdon. And it is about the end of the world and the biblical apocalypse, the Antichrist, etc. And that's where we saw the return of the beloved characters from Coven, which was to the delight of many, myself included. But Apocalypse, the name really does give it away. But we do see B.D. Wong post Gotham, which is very nice. And also Billy Porter. Billy Porter's there too. That's very important. I love Billy Porter. I would die for Billy Porter. I stan Billy Porter. This is a Billy Porter stan account. This is a multiple people stan account, but Billy Porter and Carl Urban are right there on the top. And then lastly, we have the newest season, 1984, which takes place in 1984. It is a fun season. It's a very nostalgic season. And I think it was really interesting that they released a season of 1984 not long after the release of season 3 of Stranger Things, which also takes place summer of 1984, which is when this season particularly takes place. But this one is kind of where we see the beginning of the canon story of the timeline changes in American Horror Story, which I'm interested to see how that resonates throughout the seasons that come after, since now the stories have changed, which means there's certain things in Hotel that are now different. But it is a very fun season. We brought, some people came back for that season. Emma Roberts returned for both Apocalypse and 1984. We saw the return of of Evan Peters in 1984. We saw because I believe he skipped out on Apocalypse. Jessica Lange actually came back from her several season hiatus to play Constance Langdon again in 1984. So it was a very cool season because we got to see a lot of these characters we hadn't seen since like the first season come back and be those characters again, which was really refreshing and really, really a bit of nostalgia, because at that point it had been quite some time since we'd seen those characters. So now that I've given you a bit of the brush down of the 9 seasons of the show so far in order, I'm going to tell you my top favorite to least favorite in order and give you kind of a little rundown of why I order them the way I do. Jumping into my personal order, we'd have to start number 1 with Apocalypse. That season knocked my initial first favorite down to number 2 because of how good it was. And initially, it actually caused me to want to go back and rewatch Coven, because initially Coven was not very high up on my list. It was actually one of my least favorite seasons when I went initial watch through of the show. However, how those characters grew and developed through from season 3 to season 8 made me want to go back and revisit the show because of how interesting and how complex those characters really were and how much deeper they made the issues that they're dealing with, and I really appreciated that. Also Frances Conroy as Myrtle Snow is legendary. She is hilarious and gay and perfect, and I love her as Myrtle Snow. 100%. Also in Miss Angel. Our reigning voodoo queen, Miss Marie Laveau. Give it up for her. I love everything about that character. Everything. My number 2 season, which was formerly my number 1, is Freak Show, because the running theme in that show was discrimination. Which obviously, being everything that I am and the person I exist as, is kind of something that I really related to, and I really enjoyed the characters in the season. The freaks in the show being able to tell their stories. I watched the interviews with the people who actually played them, and it was so cool to hear about these people's lives. And it was especially cool for Erica Irving, who I really do look up to because she's absolutely incredible. Having gotten to meet her, she is from the area I grew up in. She is from a very small town in the Central Valley of California that I lived in for quite some time, and that is actually how I got to meet her. She was back home visiting family. She is someone I really do look up to, and Freak Show really resonated with me, and so did the stories of all the people who came in and played the carnies, because it was something that I could connect to. It was something that I have dealt with, being queer and Black in places where there are very few people who look like me and share the same experience as me. So Freak Show is always kind of going to be a season that is close to my heart. Despite the fact that most people really hate Freak Show. Next, my number 3 season is 1984, but that is because I am a huge 80s fan, and anything 80s nostalgia related, I will eat up like nobody's business. But I really enjoyed how kind of fun it was. It was kind of campy. It was weird. It gave me kind of like different places. It gave me different vibes of all these different 80s movies. Like, it was kind of a mix of like Friday the 13th, Sleepaway Camp meets like it was just this weird mishmash of all these different things from the 80s, and I really enjoyed how just out of pocket it was at moments, and the characters were hilarious. Chet and Matthew Morrison's character are just two himbos living their best lives, and I really appreciated that. And Xavier just being the absolute stupidest white boy I've ever met was just phenomenal. Also, Billy Lord just playing this incredibly beautiful, perfect, fashionably dressed, absolute psycho, who probably give one of my favorite lines in the entire show towards the end of the season. Montana. 10 out of 10. But I really enjoyed Freak Show simply because it was campy, and also it was one of the first seasons to feature an actress who has now become one of my favorites, Angelica Ross, who is proud Black trans woman, and I love her. People cast her in more things. She deserves it. Next, we have my number 4 season, Hotel, which I love because I have been a Lady Gaga stan since 2008. It was a good season. I really enjoyed the music. And honestly, part of the reason I love Hotel so much is simply because of Liz Taylor. Seeing Dennis's dedication to playing this trans woman in the most respectful way that he could was so refreshing, as opposed to things like Tootsie, which, for the record, why the hell did they nominate it for a Tony? It's transphobic and weird and gross, and nobody likes Tootsie. And if you like Tootsie, go away. It's bad and you know it. You should be ashamed of yourself. But Dennis's portrayal of this beautiful, proud trans woman just made my heart so happy, and the final episode makes me cry without fail every single time I watch it. Just always. And then my number 5 season is Coven. It's kind of at a little below the halfway point, just because I love it, but there are so many seasons above that I just really enjoyed, that I got into a little bit more. Though Patti LuPone's character just is so interesting, and I love anything Patti LuPone just slips into, like American Horror Story, Penny Dreadful, things like that. But her character in this is just so, like, punchable. You know? Like, you want to just hit her. But also Stevie Nicks' little mini Seven Wonders moment she has is really cool. And also Marie Laveau. Marie Laveau, pretty much, is the main draw for that season to me. So good. So incredible. So talented. And then we have my number 6 season, which is Asylum, simply because there are a lot of plot holes in it. It's not a season that is particularly interesting to me, with the exception of maybe the storyline involving Lana, who is Sarah Paulson's character. And that's really the most interesting thing about it for me, though Zachary Quinto's deranged psychologist is really interesting, and it is funny to think that he played a deranged psychologist in that, and then later was enabled to be murdered by a deranged psychologist when he was in Hannibal. Anyway, Asylum's not my favorite. Then my number 7 ranking is Murder House, simply because it never has really drawn me in as a season. It's always kind of, after a certain point, I believe when I get to the episode Piggy Piggy, it's always kind of a struggle for me to watch it, just because it's kind of boring, almost, which is really, it sucks to say, because, like, it's the first season, but I really do struggle to watch it just because I know everything that comes after that season, so it's like, do I really want to finish this season, or do I just want to skip over the rest of it and get to the things that I actually enjoy watching? Number 8 is Cult, simply because I never finished watching the season, and B, I think it was an oversaturation thing at a certain point where emotionally I couldn't really handle watching the season because the subject matter was just, there was too much going on at the time when it came out, because the season was produced end of 2017. So it was oversaturating at that point, and just my brain couldn't handle it. And to this day, I still have not watched the entirety of that season, and I don't think I ever will, just because it's too much. And finally, a season I did watch all the way, Roanoke, rests at number 9 of 9, because the formatting didn't work right for the show. The entire second half kind of, well, if I'm being honest, the whole season really fell flat. But it's, the way they divided up into 2 separate halves was, I don't think, the best decision. And honestly, that is a season that I truly slogged through out of an obligation to watch it to understand what comes next in the show. So it just wasn't that good, and it wasn't interesting for me to watch. And I thought that was really disappointing, because I thought there was so much they could have done with it, and the story they come up with for the reason why everything is happening was really cool. It's just the execution was dismal at best, and that's really the nicest thing I can say about it. So now that I've kind of gone through and given you my ranking, let's get into final thoughts. I love American Horror Story. I love the casting, because the casting is always incredible. I love the ideas that they come up with and how they changed up every single season. It's a really cool idea, and it's kind of like Twilight Zone meets like Tales from the Crypt or something like that, where it's a different story and different characters every single season, but you're seeing the same faces, and if there's always a familiar face to start you off, which I think is really cool, and it really does do well to keep people engaged in the show. I'm not really, before I started watching that show, I was kind of just getting into horror, and that was a show that really helped kind of work that in for me. And I just really enjoy the show. The concept is something that was really new, and I'm really excited to see what American Horror Stories, the short film series, or the short series that is now going to kind of come up in the place of our long lost season 10 theme, which I was hoping was going to be some sort of fancy cowboy murdered vampire mermaid siren thing, which would have been awfully sexy of them. But I've heard that they're considering changing the theme, which is unfortunate, because the promo with the Orville Peck song was great and made me super excited for bloodthirsty sirens killing men. Also, hot ladies with probably no shirts on. It would have been great. However, getting away from the fact that I am gay, it's an incredible show. It's an incredible concept, and I'm really excited to see what American Horror Stories has in store for everyone. And I'm very excited to see what, if any, changes are going to be made to season 10. That wraps us up for Serial Scrutiny for this week, and I will see everybody tomorrow for Sociopolitical Smackdown. Bye.